Welcome to part 3 of Expansion and Empire. Now we're going to take a look at other rationales for American imperialism. Among the other rationales for American imperialism is what we refer to as white man's burden. Now, the phrase itself actually has a lot shorter history. The phrase was actually coined in a poem by Rudyard Kipling in 1899. In 1899, we had just finished up the Spanish-American War. We had taken Puerto Rico, the island of Guam. We had liberated Cuba. We effectively were controlling it, though. And we had acquired the Philippines. Now, we were in the process of a Philippine-American war trying to put down an insurgency in the Philippines. Now, Kipling's poem argues that the U.S. needs to take up the burden of the white man, just as the British and the other Europeans did, to try and expand globally. So we can apply this backwards back to the previous times and how we looked at this. Teddy Roosevelt, for example, loves this idea. The poem itself, he actually sent a copy of it to his friend Henry Cabot Lodge, in which he wrote, "Rather poor poetry, but a good sense of the expansion point of view." So this white man's burden becomes a euphemism for imperialism, which at least in the later phases of American imperialism, it created an avenue for anti-imperialists to couch their opposition in reaction to the phrase itself. Now, from our point of view, looking at crossing the continent, it's just the sense that the United States has this duty to uplift and civilize the people around it who are obviously primitive and miserable. We're talking about this as we're crossing the continent, right? Rudyard Kipling was talking about it when he was referenced to the Filipino people, right? Because this is closely associated with that American sense of mission. It's very easy for us to tie this all in. However, this certainly is not going to always be appreciated by those being uplifted, or in some cases, uprooted. Another rationale for American expansion is the concept of Lebensraum, right? Living space, or living room is actually what that directly translates to from the German language. Basically, space required for life and growth and activity, right? American imperialism, the expansion across the continent, was essential to provide enough land for the natural growth of the nation's population. And the more we expanded out, the more it seemed like that land that we had acquired wasn't going to be enough. Finally, we have the idea of geographic predestination, right? That the United States is destined by geographic fact to control all of North America and perhaps even beyond that, right? We can certainly see that when we take another look at Secretary of State John Quincy Adams when he talks about the nation of Cuba. Now, as I alluded to before, John Quincy Adams already had designs on Spanish Florida, and we're going to talk about that again here later on. But he also saw it going beyond that. When we take a look at how he describes Cuba, for example, we see what eventually will make at least a partial reality as a result of the Spanish-American War at the end of the 1800s, right? He says, in his commentary on Cuba, that there are laws of political as well as physical gravitation. And if an apple severed by the tempest from its native tree cannot choose but fall to the ground, Cuba, forcibly disjoined from its own unnatural connection with Spain, and incapable of self-support, there's that white man's burden coming through there, can gravitate only towards the North American Union, which by the same laws of nature cannot cast her off from its bosom. We have to take it in. It's part of that American sense of mission, right? That it's our destiny to control even places as far afield as Cuba.